The most dangerous prisons aren't built from concrete and steel. They're woven from her smile. The one that says you're the only man in the room. The one that makes the air feel warmer when she's near. You can walk anywhere, talk to anyone, but you don't. Not because you can't, because you no longer want to. No bars, no guards, no curfews. Only comfort, admiration, and the dizzying illusion that you finally found where you belong. There's no sound when the lock turns. She doesn't chain you with rules or threats. She binds you with something more potent, your own eagerness to stay. You hand her your time, your attention, your loyalty, and she takes them as if she's doing you a kindness. Deep down, you know you've surrendered the key, but you tell yourself it's love. And love, you've heard, is meant to be unconditional. Nietzsche warned that the chains we wear most willingly are the ones we fasten ourselves. In romance, those chains can feel like silk, smooth enough to make you forget their weight. You trace them with pride, calling them proof of devotion. Each day you give up a sliver of yourself, so small it feels like nothing, and yet silk burns when it's pulled too tight. She laughs at your jokes as though you're the only man alive who could make her smile. Her touch lingers, her voice softens, and the world narrows until it's only the two of you. It's sunlight after years of winter. And who turns away from sunlight? You decide you'd be a fool to question it. After all, isn't this the kind of closeness everyone craves? The first payments are so subtle you almost miss them. Swapping your shirt because her friends just dress a little sharper. Canceling plans because she can't stand being without you tonight. These aren't demands, you tell yourself. This is compromise. But the compromises are always yours. You learn her smile when you yield, and the silence when you don't. Sacrifice, you've been told, is the currency of love. But no one explains how quietly imbalance can hollow you out. Your friends stop calling. Your hobbies fade to memory. Your weekends are hers before you even check the calendar. The life you built before her doesn't crash down. It dissolves, grain by grain, under the sweetness of her presence. Months pass. You hardly recognize the man in the mirror. Not because you hate him, but because he feels smaller. Still, leaving never crosses your mind. The chains still shimmer like silk. Somewhere far behind you, a door has closed. You don't reach for the handle. After all, why escape the place you've convinced yourself is home? The door behind you has closed. What you don't notice is the walls ahead are already moving in. It starts with the smallest shifts, the kinds you'd never call control because they arrive wrapped in care. She suggests you wear the blue shirt instead of the gray one because it brings out your eyes. She proposes you skip the poker night because we hardly get time together anymore. You nod because she's right, or maybe because it's easier than explaining why you want to go. The first few adjustments are so gentle they feel like she's helping you become better, sharper, more refined, more in sync. You're not losing freedom, you're just streamlining life, or so it seems. You start checking your words before you speak. Not because she asked, but because you already know which comments get her smile and which ones get her silence. Every conversation becomes a quiet calculation, how to keep her warmth, how to avoid her coolness. This is how the tightening works, not with demands, but with patterns. She never says don't, but you learn don't all the same. You notice the pause she takes before answering when you mention an old female friend. You notice how her mood dips when you don't text back within minutes. She never accuses, but her disappointment is sharp enough to carve new boundaries without a single argument. And because there's no fight, there's nothing to win, only adjustments to make. Your world begins to shrink, not in miles, but in permissions. A movie you'd watch alone becomes our thing. A Sunday hike becomes, why would you want to go without me? She frames it as inclusion, but it feels like ownership. The gentle tightening makes it impossible to name the problem without sounding ungrateful. After all, she's just loving you. And what kind of man complains about being loved too much? By now, you've stopped noticing how many yeses you give. It's automatic, a reflex. The silk chains don't clink, they sigh, like fabric against skin. You mistake their softness for safety. She doesn't have to tell you where to be, what to say, or who to see. You've already internalized her preferences as your own. That's the trick. When you think her desires are your choices, she's no longer just influencing you, she's programming you. Nietzsche might have called it a voluntary servitude, the sweetest kind, because you believe you're free. The gentle tightening doesn't provoke rebellion, it erases the impulse for it. You feel in tune with her, aligned, connected, but these are just polished words for submission. Every decision you make flows through an invisible filter. Will she like this? Will she approve? Without realizing it, you've outsourced your compass to her. One night, you cancel plans with an old friend at the last minute. You tell yourself it's because you're tired. But as you watch her smile from across the room, you feel the truth. You're tired of the tension her disappointment brings. Avoiding that weight has become second nature. And in that moment, somewhere deep down, you understand. The walls have moved closer, they'll keep moving, and soon there won't be enough space left to turn around. And when the space to turn around is gone, the only movement left is toward her. You tell yourself it's a choice, that each step is an act of love, not a concession. But somewhere in the quiet, you know the walls haven't stopped moving. They've simply grown familiar enough for you to call them home. You've learned every contour, every texture, until you can trace them in the dark. Nietzsche would call this what it is, a voluntary servitude. The tragedy isn't that someone has stolen your freedom, it's that you've bartered it away for the illusion of safety. You've convinced yourself dependence feels warmer than the cold air of solitude, and so you lean into her orbit, mistaking its gravity for belonging. The comfort is real, but it's also the hook. It begins to feel noble, even righteous, to anticipate her desires before she speaks them. You reframe your own shrinking as virtue. In Nietzsche's terms, this is slave morality, dressed in romance. Fear rebranded as loyalty, erosion of self-sold as devotion. And the more you yield, the more certain you become that this sacrifice is proof of your worth. When in truth, it's proof of how far you'll bend to avoid her displeasure. Your internal compass starts to rust. I want slowly dissolves into she prefers. Decisions are run through an invisible filter. Will she like this? Will she approve? You forget the man who once acted without looking for her expression as permission. If she left tomorrow, what would remain might not be a man at all, but a silhouette drawn entirely by her expectations. This exchange is so quiet, most men never notice it happening. There's no shouting, no ultimatums, only a steady trade, autonomy for acceptance, self-respect for the comfort of knowing you'll never have to stand alone. It's a seductive bargain, right until you realize the hand you're holding is the same one turning the lock. The mind plays cruel tricks in captivity. You start calling the bars boundaries, the cell commitment. You tell yourself this is love, because if it isn't, then you've built your prison brick by brick. And that truth would be too heavy to face. So you polish the bars until they shine, convincing yourself that beauty is freedom. Friends who once knew you notice the change. They hesitate before speaking, unsure if they're talking to the man they remember or the role you've become. Some drift away, others stay quiet, hoping you'll wake up on your own. But their silence feels like judgment, so you retreat further into the only space that still feels predictable, her shadow. Deep down, though, a shadow stirs in the corner of your mind. If she lets go, will you even know who you are? That question is the one thing you don't dare answer, because if you do, you might have to turn around, and there's no space left to turn. The first crack doesn't sound like an explosion. It sounds like her laugh, just a little too sharp. It cuts through the evening like glass, a neat incision you almost pretend not to feel. She's telling a story to friends, one where you're the harmless punchline and the room obliges. You smile on cue, but beneath the performance, you register the fact that everyone understood the same hierarchy, and you were placed at the bottom without a vote. You smile along, of course. That's what's expected. The script is simple. Take the hit, keep the peace, be the good man. But between the polite chuckle and the knot forming under your ribs, you face a harder truth. She's comfortable spending your dignity like loose change. It's not malice, it's muscle memory. She bets you won't push back, and she wins because she's right. Power isn't always taken. Often it's left unattended. Nietzsche warned about the slow corruption of the soul, not by grand betrayals but by 1,000 tiny humiliations you agree to endure. You tell yourself it's harmless, that she's just being playful, but every laugh at your expense is a receipt for another piece of ground surrendered. Stack enough receipts and you don't live in a home anymore. You live in a showroom arranged to impress other people. The night drifts, drinks refill, her hand finds your arm, familiar, proprietary, and for a second you want to believe the gesture cancels the sting. It doesn't. You hear how her voice softens in private and sharpens in public, how warmth becomes a currency she spends to purchase applause. You realize what you've been calling intimacy might just be access, provided when you perform, revoked when you don't. Back home, quiet wraps the rooms. She scrolls, laughs at something on her phone, kisses your shoulder, and falls asleep quickly. You lie awake with the echo of that laugh tunneling through the drywall. You catch yourself rehearsing retorts you'll never use, drafting boundaries you won't speak out loud. Cowardice? Maybe. But the more accurate word is dependence, the kind that turns your voice into contraband in your own chest. Morning doesn't save you. The coffee cools untouched, and you notice how carefully you pick neutral topics, how your gaze scouts her mood before you say anything that might change it. You remember a time you chose for yourself without internal permission slips. It feels remote now, like a country you left without a passport. When she jokes about last night, you know I'm teasing. You nod, because disagreeing would make the air heavier, and you've learned to fear heavy air. Yet something has shifted. You don't rush to fill silences. You let them stand like mirrors. In the stillness, a clean sentence forms. I don't like who I am around you in public. It startles you with its simplicity, the way truth always does when you've spent months narrating around it. Light moves through the crack, thin but real. It asks for a cost you've avoided paying, the end of compliance. And compliance, you know now, is the mortgage on your self-respect. Pay it off, or lose the house. Control never surrenders without a fight, and hers begins the second you stop playing along. The shift is instant, a subtle tension in the air, the tilt of her head as if she's detected a frequency that tells her something has changed. You haven't said anything outright, but in relationships like this, silence can be louder than speech. At first, she tests the boundaries in ways that seem harmless. A sharper tone here, a pointed question there. Is something wrong? It's bait, not curiosity. She's probing for weakness, looking for the smallest crack where her old influence might seep back in. You recognize it now, the rhythm of someone accustomed to winning without having to ask twice. When you don't yield immediately, the pressure increases. She escalates in subtle, precise increments. Late replies laced with implication, pauses before answering, moments of deliberate distance followed by sudden surges of attention. Each move is calculated to make you reach for her again, and in the past, you always did. Nietzsche's words surface in your mind. Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become one. The temptation is there, to match her control with your own, to outmaneuver her, to turn every conversation into a game of chess, where the only goal is to corner her. But you understand the warning, resist badly, and you become the very thing you're trying to escape. You could play her game. You could withhold affection, ignore her messages, make her feel the sting of uncertainty she's fed you for months. And yet, there's something corrosive about that path. It's not freedom if your choices are still defined by her shadow. True liberation isn't reversing the chain. It's melting it entirely. So you try a different approach. Boundaries without venom. You stop justifying every decision. You reclaim hours for yourself without announcing where they go. You let your phone rest face down without the reflex to check. She notices, and noticing turns into confrontation. You've changed, she says, as if the shift were an accusation. In a way it is, because change means she no longer holds the same map of you. Her pushback grows sharper, invitations laced with obligation, questions framed as concern, moments of warmth designed to draw you back in, followed by the cold shoulder when you don't bite. It's a cycle you've seen before, but this time you're watching it from outside the glass, tracing the pattern without stepping inside. The hardest part isn't resisting her, it's resisting yourself. That reflex to explain, to appease, to keep the air light, it's an old instinct that dies slowly. Each time you choose quiet resolve over reactive retaliation, you feel a different kind of strength building, one that doesn't need her approval to stand. And in that stillness, the question Nietzsche would have you ask takes root. What's more dangerous, her desire, or your fear of losing it? The gate was open all along. But standing before it, you realize freedom demands more than just walking through. You've told yourself for months that escape was a matter of opportunity, that the absence of a lock would be enough. Yet here you are, with the hinges wide and the light spilling in, feeling the weight of something far heavier than any chain, choice. Outside the air looks cleaner, sharper, like it belongs to another life. Inside, everything is familiar. The rhythm of the rooms, the echo of her voice, the habits worn smooth by repetition. Comfort isn't safety, but it wears the same skin. And comfort whispers that the unknown could hurt more than the bruises you've learned to live with. Nietzsche would say the will to power is the will to overcome yourself. In this moment, you understand why so few people do. It's not just about leaving her. It's about leaving the version of you that could only exist in her shadow. That means walking away from the role you've played so long it's fused to your skin. You glance back. She's in the next room, not watching, not stopping you. That's the cruel genius of voluntary servitude. The captor doesn't have to guard the gate if the prisoner's fear does the work. Your hands flex at your sides, restless with the urge to move and the dread of what that movement might set in motion. A memory surfaces. The first time she laughed at your joke. The first time her hand found yours. You felt infinite then, not small. That's the problem. The chain didn't start as iron. It started as silk, and silk is harder to drop because it still feels soft in your palm, even as it tightens. The light from the threshold stretches across your feet now, warming your skin. You take a breath that feels different, fuller, almost foreign. This is what air tastes like when it hasn't been filtered through someone else's approval. Your chest aches with the realization that you've been breathing shallow for years. One step forward, just one. That's all it would take to cross. But in that single step is the death of the man who needed her to feel whole, and the birth of someone you've never met. You stand there, the choice trembling between your ribs, knowing the rest of your life will tilt one way or the other in the next heartbeat. The gate was open all along, but I'm not sure he stepped through.